So today, as we're moving forward, we are going to talk a great deal about emotions. We want you to begin to recognize that the emotional guidance system that is within you is the most important part of your life experience for you to work on understanding. Because if you will come into conscious awareness of the way you feel and what it means, then you will be able to fulfill your reason for being, and then you can get on with the joyous expansion that is natural to all of you. The range of emotions goes from what you would call joy to what you would call agony, maybe those are the best words. Or the range of emotions go from what you would call empowerment to what you would call disempowerment. Maybe those are the best words. You could call it absolute knowledge of your freedom or a feeling that you are not free. Maybe those are the words. The words do not matter, but you're getting the sense of what we're talking about. When you are in alignment with who you really are, you feel wonderful, and it feels like empowerment. It feels like freedom. It feels like joy. It feels like passion. In other words, it feels like being alive. That is naturally who you are. But when you feel despair, when you are down there in the range that you might call fear or despair, depression, those feelings, no matter what words you are offering to try to describe them, they are always, every single time, about your feeling of lack of power. It's your feeling of disempowerment. So we will not begin to even touch upon all of the names that could be given to all of the emotions along this emotional scale. Just know that it's a variation between your feeling of power and your feeling of disempowerment. And the words don't matter all that much, what you use. It's the way you feel that helps you to know that. So let's say you know someone, or maybe even you might remember being in a place where you feel utter disempowerment. You might call it depression. You might call it despair. Something has happened and you feel awful. You can't even get a breath of air. And your Abraham friends are saying, you create your own reality. And you're saying, surely that can't be true, or I would have killed you long ago. Because those bright-eyed, fluffy, sunshine, lollipop, rainbow, cotton candy, happy, tuned in, tapped in, turned on people are so annoying when you're not there. In other words, they are like fingernails on a blackboard. You cannot hear them because they are vibrationally different than where you are, and it is annoying. Never tell someone when they are in a mess that they are the creator of their own reality. Watch for things to go well before you break that news to them. It will go a lot better. But so here you are in depression, and someone's trying to cheer you up or even trying to scold you into feeling better, and it doesn't go very well with you because you don't have vibrational access to where they are. You can't relate in the moment. And what we want you to realize is that that's natural. In other words, you cannot find thoughts that are vibrationally very far apart from the drum that you've been beating. So whatever is really activated within you, no matter how it got activated, it's not important. Like Magellan, we're not asking either. But whatever it is that is happening to you and whatever it is that's causing this vibration within you, you don't have access to thoughts that are very far from where you are. Joseph Campbell offered the best words that we've ever heard for guiding one's life when he said, "Follow your bliss." But we want to say to you that if you are in fear or depression or despair, you don't have access to bliss. And reaching for bliss from that place is going to be a confounding experience for you, because it is not vibrationally possible to make that sort of quantum leap. Not without a lobotomy, or not without serious inducement of drugs. In other words, not without something that will dramatically change your point of focus. And what we've noticed is that that point of focus, whatever drum you've been beating, is probably beating within you on a number of different levels. And so while you could temporarily distract yourself, usually you return to where you are if you have not consciously made a deliberate effort to move up this vibrational emotional scale. So what we are suggesting to you is that from your place of depression, that a bout of anger might be the best thing that you could do for yourself, because it is something that you can do for yourself. Have you noticed that from depression that you do have access to angry thoughts? You do, because they are vibrationally not so different. So as you reach for the thought that makes you feel angry, and you have this new mantra that's sort of beating in the back of your head that you've heard from us, that says, I'm going to do my very best to find the best feeling thought that I have access to. And it's that I have access to that is the key word here. Because if you will reach for a thought that you have access to and feel the refreshment in this rage that you've discovered, it is so much better feeling than the depression that you were feeling before. And you stop and say, I did this on purpose. I've deliberately chosen this angry thought, and I'm deliberately milking it for everything it's worth for one reason and one reason only. I feel better in my anger than I did in my depression. You do, don't you? And can you feel that when you do that, if you were to do that, and if you were to say that, and if you were to know that, and you will know, can you feel that you have regained some of your power back? And are you aware that it is the loss of power that was making you feel so depressed to begin with? And now it is not likely that you will need to return to that depression? Sometimes we see you go from depression to anger because it is a sort of self-survival instinct. But then so many people are critical of your anger that you go back to depression. So you go depression, anger, depression, anger, depression, anger, and then they give you a label. Then they worry about you. And if you were to be mostly depressed or angry, you could become a menace to society. In other words, you might get angry enough that you might begin acting out, and then they really will label you. They'll lock you up. They'll try to separate you from them because they're afraid of you. And that's an interesting thing, isn't it? Society, even your friends, would really rather that you are depressed than angry. Selfishly, it works out better for them. Because when you're depressed, you go off and leave them alone, and when you're angry, you're often in their face. And so we understand why you would not be encouraged into your anger. But from your source soul level, we are encouraging you into your anger if you are depressed. Now, if you are frustrated, we would never encourage you into anger because that's going the wrong way on the emotional scale, isn't it? In other words, can you feel how a feeling of anger would be a great relief from depression? Relief is the operative word here. And can you feel how a feeling of frustration would be a relief from anger? And can you feel how a feeling of hopefulness or belief would be a relief from frustration? And knowing is certainly a relief from belief. Knowing something feels so much better than just hoping it or even believing it. In other words, there is the potential of relief in literally every emotion that you would find, even those that are up here in the range of ecstasy. There is no limit to how good we can feel. We're not kidding you. So if you begin to say, nothing is more important than that I feel good, and I'm going to begin to reach for the relief, the feeling of relief from resistance, can you see how this is the path to allowing? Leaving behind things that don't feel good must leave you in a better feeling place. Condemning things that don't feel good takes you right to them. Reaching for something that gives you relief from that, that's the ticket. You're getting the sense of this. As Jerry and Esther are driving from Phoenix to San Diego, on their way to San Diego, they love San Diego, about a 400-mile journey. About halfway is a city called Yuma, Arizona. They don't want to be in Yuma, they want to be in San Diego. But when they find themselves in Yuma, they don't get so discouraged or so distracted or so confused that they just turn around and go back to Phoenix. In other words, they understand the distance between Phoenix and San Diego, and even though for most of the journey they're not where they want to be, they do not lose heart because they understand the journey. It's easy to understand the distance, the 400-mile distance. So they don't get discouraged. Every journey is understandable, but you have to make it an emotional journey before you understand it. In other words, we see you in your not having enough money. Sometimes it's a very serious feeling to you. And the journey between poverty or deep, serious debt to financial security and independence is an understandable journey if you will make it an emotional journey. And here's what we mean by that. Let's take some other examples. You could be diagnosed with some deadly disease, and you would want to take the journey from this sickness back into wellness. But that doesn't feel to you, to most of you, as an easily understood journey like the distance is from Phoenix to San Diego. Would you agree? In other words, you know what to do to get from Phoenix to San Diego, but you don't know what to do to get from a deadly illness to wellness. And what we want you to understand is that whether your journey is from no money to plenty of money, or a sick body to a healthy body, or a rotten relationship or an absent relationship to a glorious relationship, if you will begin to say, I want this to be an emotional journey first, which means I want to release the fear of sickness and replace it with the feeling of confidence of wellness. I want to replace this panicked feeling of not enough money with a feeling of well-being, of financial security. Can you hear the difference? Because you can make that journey today. You can take an emotional journey with far less effort than you believe in a matter of minutes, certainly in a matter of a day or two. And once, here it is, and once, here it is, and once, are you listening? And here it is, here it is. Here is what you've been reaching for. Once you make the emotional journey, you're home free, because once you make the emotional journey, you've shifted your vibration. And once you've shifted your vibration, your point of attraction has shifted. Once you make the emotional journey, and once you feel the relief of leaving those vibrations behind you, now you're in a place where you have to now let in. In other words, you're letting it in now. Once you find that relief, you're letting it in. And that's the only part of the equation that has ever been out of whack ever. Because step 1 says you ask. You can't help do that. Step 2 says source answers. It always does every single time. No exceptions. Step 3 is the part that's been out of whack for anybody that's not getting what they want. And taking the emotional journey will put step 3 into perspective, because when you feel better, you're vibrating differently. And when you're vibrating differently, things are happening differently. You are multifaceted beings. And there are many things in your life experience that are getting your attention. And you vibrate more purely, and by that we mean more in alignment with who you are on some topics than on others. And you can tell which topics you've got cleaned up and which topics you have some work to do by the way you feel. When something makes you mad on a regular basis, you've got some work to do. If something makes you frustrated on a regular basis, you've got some work to do. Many of you have been listening to us for a while. Many of you have sat in this chair, and you may be feeling a little confusion as you listen to us here, because you have seen us on more than one occasion refuse to encourage someone to talk about their issue. We say, let's not beat that drum. Why talk about what you don't want? Let's talk about what you do want. And so it may seem odd for you to hear us today encouraging you to get on a rampage of anger and stay there. But we want you to pay attention to where you begin. In other words, what is your emotional set point as you are beginning this trek up this emotional scale? Because most of you, the majority of time, as we sniff out your vibration, are somewhere between frustration, overwhelmment, and joy. In other words, that's your range. You're frustrated and overwhelmed all the way up to feeling very good about your life experience. And very rarely do you dip into anger or into despair. But you are teachers who often are counseling or interacting with people who are often in a place of fear or despair. So the tools that we are offering you today have a broader range in helping people to get from wherever they are to wherever they're wanting to be. And knowing where you are, in other words, that's the first thing that Magellan, the guidance system in the vehicles, ascertains. Where are you? Where are you? And now, where do you want to be? So as we're visiting with you, we were eager to talk with you about anything that is important to you. And if you want, we'll help you to identify where you are vibrationally. Where is your emotional set point on the topic that you've come here to discuss? And as we figure out together where that is, and you just do that by trial and error, you say, does it feel like this or this? Does it feel like this or this? Does it feel more like this or this? Well, does it feel like this or this or this or this? Feel like this? Oh, feels about like that. That's right there, right there. You got it. That's right where it feels. And once you've figured out where you are feeling, then you know which feelings on the emotional scale to begin reaching for. And together it is our promise that you will not only shift your vibration as a result of our conversation together here today, but you will never again, ever be stuck in a point of attraction that does not please you. Today you are going to regain complete empowerment over your own creative experience.